Hello there. How you guys doing? Welcome to the March 2013 Electronic Music Meetup.
Hey.
I'm so glad you could be here. This is a really special presentation. We have Carson Dave from Dave Smith Instruments and also lead programmer Chris. Yes.
Fantastic. Thank you. So,
anyways, as we are hosted by Pure Mind, we have a short video we'd like to show from the from Pure Mind itself.
Very much like to thank Pure Mind for hosting me here once again. I think this institution is really cool, and until I came here for the first time, I had never seen anything like it in my whole life.
What I think really separates us from other people who teach is that we are outrageously passionate about what we do, and especially in electronic music.
Since coming to Pure Mind, I've discovered electronic music, and San Francisco being a mecca for underground electronic music opened up so many doors for me and kind of blew my mind.
We cover everything from absinthe to contact. When people get to the mind-melting level, we get into modular synthesis.
Everything about native instruments, everything about Logic synths down to the finest detail. We learned it all.
The fundamentals of understanding how things work, that's just essential. But then beyond that, there's so much more, and that's where it gets into just a lot of the artistic side of like the creative approach of why you do something, not just how.
There's a lot of schools that just, they focus on the technicality of recording music, but I wanted something that would foster creativity and really help me develop as an artist as well.
Each of our genre-specific programs comes in 4 levels. There's a basic, an advanced, a professional, and then a master's level. And the master's level is, of course, everything we do. It's the largest and most powerful programs that we can create for you.
Now we'd like to bring up our feature presentation.
Hello. Oh, I'm loud. Hi, I'm Carson. Introduced myself over there. This is Chris. We're both from Dave Smith Instruments. And first off, we'd like to thank the SF-EMM and Pure Mind for having us, and for all of you to come check out our products. So this doesn't quite fit on my head, so I got to put it around my neck. Can you all hear me? Is that all good? Okay. So we brought 3 of our newest products from the past year and a half, 2 years, to show for you. Kind of gauge of hands. Is there any one instrument you guys are more interested in? Like show of hands, Mofo X4. Okay, not so much. Tempest. Okay, a little more, and then the Prophet. Yeah, okay, so lots of people here for the Prophet. I'm gonna get to this guy last. And I'm gonna I'm gonna start with our oldest product, technically, which is the Tempest analog drum machine. So at its core, it's a 6-voice synthesizer. Technically, it's kind of hybrid in that there's 2 digital oscillators as well as 2 analog oscillators in it. Following that, however, the entire signal chain to the output is 100% analog. It's highly configurable, kind of performance-based drum machine that just sounds fantastic. So I'm going to scoot this over here, and I will start showing you some of what goes on with it. So there's a couple ways to work with this. To begin, when you're making a sound, each voice has 4 oscillators, as I previously mentioned, 2 analog and 2 digital. Following the 4 oscillators, we have an analog low-pass filter that's 2 and 4 pole, self-oscillating. I'm holding this kind of upside down here. We have an audio modulation, which is FM from oscillator 1, which runs to the filter cutoff. Following that, we have an analog high-pass filter, and then a feedback path which feeds the post-high pass signal in pre-low pass filter. And this is a great way of adding kind of subtle harmonic excitement to a signal, kind of tonally shaping it more tonally, or you can just completely destroy it, by really crank it up, and you can get almost, big, distorted, almost guitar amp type sounds. So for the Tempest and for making drum sounds, you need really fast envelopes, and we have 5 of them. Which is it? 4 of them are freely assignable, though 3 of them default to being mapped to pitch, low pass, amplitude, and then we have 2 auxiliary envelopes as well. Following that, we have 2 LFOs and an extensive 8x8 modulation matrix. So with all that together, you can make some really, really amazing sounds, and very quickly for that matter. So I'm just going to create a quick drum sound for you, and you can see how easy it is. Once you spent a little time on it, of course. And let's see here. We're in there. And okay, so that's a hi-hat. So I'll just start by throwing in a little bit of a triangle wave or down there. Get the filter to start self-oscillating. And give a little shape to that filter through the filter envelope. There's already a lot going on there just with an oscillator and a filter self-oscillating and a little bit of the filter envelope hitting that. So, there's your drum sound just to start with very basically, but you can go really, really, really deep with the rest of the features to make it, huge, huge, beefy sounds. So for example, here's a set of sounds I made that are 100% analog. They're not using any of the samples. So if you're all familiar with the 808, that was an emulation I did of an 808. And it's kind of funny that we're still taking this new technology and trying to create these old sounds with it. Point is, we can take this new technology, create the old sounds, and make some really, really wild, interesting new sounds on top of it as well. So it really covers a base of having all sorts of different sounds with it. You can also use it as a polyphonic synthesizer as well. So I'll just demo a couple quick sounds that are more synth-like here. It's a very simple one. So all sorts of different sounds: drums, kicks, snares, synths, basses. And it's not just a studio piece. So while it really integrates well into the studio, we have individual outputs for each voice, so you can multi-track everything out, have all your drums or bass or lead sounds on separate channels in your DAW. It's really intended as a live creation and performance tool. So the hierarchy for the overall the drum machine is you have a project. Within a project, you have 16 beats. Within each beat, you can have 32 sounds, and each beat can have different sounds, and each beat can have different time signatures, swing values, distortion, compressor settings, and that allows you to create a lot of really great stuff on the fly. So if you just wanted to get recording to begin with, just press record and play, hit your click so you know what you're playing to, though you don't have to, and you can just start going. So there's a couple of really great features on this that lend themselves to live creation. We have these 2 great pressure and position sensitive touch sliders that can be routed to modulate basically any of the available parameters as modulation destination parameters. So right now they're mapped to the pitch of the oscillators and then the low pass filter. So you can do some pretty interesting stuff like that. So I'll just start kind of jamming and see what kind of weird sounds we can get out of it and keep talking as that's going on. now we got that going. We can remove our click. We have a great feature called roll that will basically repeat a sound at its quantization value, or a beat roll value. So right now I can turn roll on, and I can record some 16th hats over this very easily. We also have a reverse function that'll actually it won't just reverse the sound, but it'll reverse the envelopes, because everything is created analog. It's not just reversing a sample. And that can be interesting. So that's a tom reversed. And so you have the ability to go through and take your tracks and say you wanted to load a different snare. You can select the snare. Start auditioning different sounds, find the one you like, the levels right. Now, this is a beat that you have recorded, and you can go out into beat mode and switch between beats at different quantized values. You can wait for the end of a beat to end before it switches to the next beat, or it'll switch at various quantization values. Really, really cool thing about this beat mode is that we have what are called beat effects. So it gives you the ability to control the filter cutoff for both low pass and high pass, resonance, audio modulation, feedback, pitch, and attack and decay portions of the envelopes for the entire beat, the entire sound. So I'll give you a little example of what that sounds like. You can roll the whole thing. And then reset it back to normal. Or, let's say you found a really nice sound that you like in there. Let's shorten the envelopes up. And you can just copy that sound. Let's say I want that on its own beat. Now I can copy that with those settings to a new beat. And now the sounds have those settings preset. So it's a really great way to get going really quickly and just have get a lot of creative ideas out. You start with something that's a little more traditional. You start twisting some knobs and you get some really crazy sounds, and you can save them and go through and keep adding to it. We also have a playlist which allows you to string beats together so they can be played back. So if you wanted to sequence, say, verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, you could do that on various beats just by pressing record and play, switching beats. That beat doesn't have anything in it, but you can just go back and play that back, and it'll go back through. And then you can be modulating it live as it's playing back. And there's that beat with nothing on it. So it's a really, really great live instrumentation, studio tool that just sounds fantastic. It was a collaboration between Dave Smith, who has been making synthesizers since 1978. Obviously, the Prophet 5 is one of his most famous pieces. The analog voices in this, designed by Dave, sound fantastic. They mix great. They sit in a mix great. It's so much easier to get this guy going. And often I find just in the time I put into creating the sounds, there's less I need to put into a mix because I'm really sculpting it from the beginning instead of just throwing something in and trying to fix it afterwards. The other collaborator on this was Roger Linn, and you may know he's the inventor of the MPC, kind of godfather of the modern drum machine. They both came together and just made this amazing, outstanding product. And with the help of this fine gentleman right here, lead programmer, and he's just working on it constantly. It's an amazing product. It sounds fantastic. A couple things I didn't mention. There's an analog distortion and compressor on the output as well. So that's on the stereo output. The compressor uses a chip made by that corporation. It sounds really, really good. You find a lot of those in kind of DBX compressors, and the distortion is all analog as well and can be programmed per beat. So I'll just give you a quick little listen for how that sounds. So no distortion. 25%. 50%. Can really get gritty there. And then the compressor. And get a different kick in there. That'll work a little better. So you can really hear it breathing there. And that's a great thing too. In beat mode, you can assign various parameters to the effect sliders, which gives you another level of control and kind of performance on the unit. So it's a fantastic instrument. It was originally the instrument I began doing sound design on before I was hired at DSI, and I've just found it to be absolutely amazing. You can even do, for example, kind of more traditional piano-like sounds with it. And you can control them from an external MIDI device polyphonically. So here's like a Rhodes type sound. Or A200, vintage keyboard type sound. Tines, whatnot. And then in this mode, you can also, we have a 16 tunings mode where you can play notes across the range of the pads with scale constrictions as well. So there's a diminished scale. We have, how many modes are there? You know, 22 different constricted scales. So just a creative beast. Absolutely love it. And how long have I been talking about the Tempest? Because I got to leave time for everything else. What, 13 minutes? All right, so I'm 7 minutes late. I'll switch over here. Next up is the Mofo X4. So this is the product that came out after the Tempest. A little less innovative in the sense that this was really a brand new product built from the ground up. Basically a whole new kind of paradigm for both Roger and Dave in terms of how they're building instruments. The Mofo X4 right here is a little bit more of a rehash of one of Dave's classic designs. So when Dave came back to start Dave Smith Instruments, he started with the Evolver synthesizer, which, if you don't know, Anu Kirk made the most amazing guide to it. If any of you own Evolvers, download Anu Kirk's definitive guide to the Evolver. It's fantastic. Really good, thank you. He started with the Evolver. He moved on to making the Prophet, which Prophet 08, kind of as an homage to the Prophet 5. From that product came the Mofo Synthesizer, which is a single voice of the Prophet with 2 sub-oscillators in addition, as well as a feedback path post-filter to the pre-filter. And we took that sound, we said, we want to make an affordable polyphonic analog synthesizer, and we came up with the Mofo X4. So this is basically like having 4 Mofos in one, 4-voice polyphonic, 100% analog signal path, and I believe right now it's retailing for $12.49 or $12.99. So in terms of polyphonic analog synthesizers, you're not going to find a better deal than that. If you wanted to put together a Moog system with 4 voices of polyphony, it would probably cost you at least $4,000. Yes?
The Mofo X4 is polyphonic.
It is.
I have the original Mofo at my house right now, and isn't the name kind of a play on words for being monophonic?
Indeed, I believe it is. Yeah. So you know, it's a little bit of a misnomer, but it's like you have 4 Mofos in one, so it fits that way. And what's really great too is that you can take a Tetra synthesizer, which is a kind of desktop version for voice Mofo. You can polychain that with the X4, and you can add to its voices. So you can polychain up to 3 Tetras with this and have a 16-voice analog synthesizer. So I'm just going to kind of go over this really quick. The basic signal path, you have 2 oscillators, all the classic waveforms, sawtooth, reverse sawtooth, square, triangle. Each of the oscillators has a sub-oscillator, 1 and 2 octaves down, respectively, under oscillators 1 and 2. The oscillators can be pulse width modulated, they have glides, sub-octaves, so get this going here. I got a little sequence going here. So here's your oscillators. pulse width, sub-oscillator, your mix between oscillators. Here's your feedback. It really can be used to beef up a signal here. So, following the oscillators, we have our analog low-pass filter again. Similar to was there a little bit of tuning done in the Tempest, or is it pretty much the same? Minor tunings, but it's basically the same analog filter in all of our products. It's a really nice sounding filter. It can be really gritty, can be a little more smooth. Again, it's 2 and 4 pole. We have 3 envelopes in here, so a filter envelope, dedicated VCA envelope, as well as a third auxiliary envelope, which can be repeated or basically looped, which is quite nice. You can use it almost as a separate LFO. We have 4 LFOs. We have 4x4 modulation matrix, and then we also have a 4x16 step sequencer that's available in most of our other products, except for the Prophet 12 and Tempest. So I'm just going to kind of run through some sounds. I'm not a player, so I'm not going to play, as it were, but I'm going to make some sounds and kind of listen to it. It's an amazing sounding synth and packs a lot into a small portable package at a great price. So let's just run through some of these, and you can see where we get. So. So I'm just going through an LFO and assigning it to various things, going through, and you can see we have a very extensive modulation list. Go back. So that was kind of more of a traditional, smoother thing. Here's a big feedback drum sequence. So this uses the sequencer as well. You can make synthesizer sounds, you can make drum sounds, you can make sequence sounds. You can go in and change that sequence. Let's see what's going on here. And destination 2. There we go. So different stuff. You can get a lot of different stuff out of here. Really smooth, kind of. There's your Daft Punk sound, except lower. So you can sync the oscillators as well, which give you that nice sync sound. And all the way to, let's say, Mellotron sounds. So you can make all sorts of different sounds on this one guy, and it's 100% analog. Again, sits great in a mix. I can't just articulate how much easier it makes everything. I started off using software, and as soon as I integrated hardware synths into my setup, I was like, oh, this is what I've been missing. So all sorts of stuff. And you can do fake kind of echo type stuff by just using LFOs on the tail of a filter coming down and the amplitude. It's really interesting, all the things you can do in synthesis. And this isn't working as it should. Something changed with this patch. So that's the X4. It's really fantastic. It sounds great. On to our newest product that you're all here to see, the Prophet 12. So the Prophet 12 is our newest flagship instrument. It's not out yet. It should be out hopefully late April, early May.
Mid-May.
Mid-May. So Chris knows, mid-May. He's working a lot on it. It's a brand new instrument to us. It does not have analog oscillators that have been in our other products. The oscillators are 100% digital, and they're brand new. The basic signal path of the Prophet 12 is there's 4 oscillators, as well as a sub-oscillator under oscillator 1. Each oscillator has the classic, kind of classic waveform shapes. So let me pull something up here so I can go through them. So you have sawtooth, pulse, triangle, sine, and then we also have a wave mix. The wave mix is actually a combination of 3 different wavetables that can be configured, and you can pan between them. So I'll go through a couple of those. You can see mixing through one wavetable, into the next, into the third, into the next, into the third, and it's just a great way to get all sorts of different type of sounds out of it. So you can get kind of the classic analog sounds out of it, or you can have these big, dreamy, expansive pads and very complex tonal things just from the oscillators without even touching the rest of the signal chain. Great thing about our digital oscillators is they can be stably FM and amplitude modulated well into the audio range, and it's incredibly stable. Very difficult to do with 100% analog oscillators. And what else have we added here? The slot parameter per oscillator. So since they're digital oscillators, they can be extremely perfect, stable, consistent. What we've added is a slot parameter, which kind of makes it sound older or like a VCO, like it's drifting and tracking, and that can be set per oscillator. So here we have no slop. Start going and you start hearing it wandering more. So that becomes a lot more apparent when you add a second oscillator for it to kind of phase and beat against. You can add slop on the second oscillator as well. There's your big old VCO, straight open synth sound. 2 oscillators drifting off each other. Haven't even touched the rest of it. So following the oscillators, or I'll do a little FM too and AM, so I'll show you that. So at lower values, it'll give you kind of that phasey, chorusy thing as the waves interact with each other. It can go absolutely crazy as well, depending on what you're throwing at it. So FM, AM, all the oscillators, it goes oscillator 1, FMs 4, 4 to 3, 3 to 2, 2 to 1. You can also do cross modulations across various oscillators, so you could send 4 to 2 and to 3 and have that work. Following the digital oscillator section, we have a character section, which is basically a section of digital-based effects, the top of which is called girth and air, and that's kind of a shelf tonal shaping tool. So you can see air, kind of bringing up that upper order harmonics there. Girth isn't doing much because that's too high. Kind of beefens that up in like low mid area. So it's just another way to get a little bit more tonal shaping out of the oscillators before they hit the analog signal path. We also have a hack, bit hack and decimate. So that's a decimation and sample rate reduction there. And then we also have a drive. And so this is all pre-filter. This is all happening in the digital domain. We're not going and doing any A to D in this section yet. So post character section, digital oscillators, character section, all the way out to this, the output is now analog. So we have a 4-pole, again, our 4 2-pole Curtis filter on our products. Following that, we have an analog high pass that's similar to the Tempest, except that we've added resonance as well. and it can be pushed into self-oscillation. If you do a little bit more modulation on it, it's a little squirrely, so it can get really, really crazy. Following the analog high-pass filter, we have the VCA, and then we have a tunable feedback, which is Dave used on the Evolver line of synths, and it's actually outside of, you don't have an AD/DA in the signal output from it. So the feedback takes the signal from the chain and then it's computed in the digital section of the synth. So you're minimizing the AD and DA stages in it to maintain as kind of pristine a signal path as possible. We also have a four-tap multi-mode delay, 2 auxiliary envelopes, so envelopes 3 and 4. They can all the envelopes can also be repeated. They can be basically cycle through the entire ADSR of the waveform. In terms of modulators, we have 4 LFOs. Each LFO has a slew rate as well as a phase start, which allows you to take square LFOs and push them down to sines and start slewing signals with them. And then we have an extensive 16:2 modulation matrix. So it's just a lot in here. What I was playing for you earlier was 2 oscillators. So I'm just kind of going to go through and make some sounds and get an idea for the, what kind of crazy sounds you can get out of this. It's really wonderful. So if you have any questions of what I'm doing, or if you're, what was that knob you just turned, feel free to stick up your hand. Oh, yes, that's right. So we also have the analog distortion from the Tempest on the Prophet 12, and it's actually 2 separate distortion circuits. So the Prophet 12 is bitimbral, meaning you can split it or stack it and have 2 separate programs playing at the same time. And each of those programs can have independent analog distortion settings, and it's really, really great feature. We also borrowed the pressure and touch-sensitive sliders from the Tempest as well, which just adds another kind of great way to interact with it and use it as a performance tool. And I forgot to mention, we have a really nice arpeggiator that's very extensive, and I'll just leave it at that since we just finished. So we have it's a great arpeggiator. Has the typical up down modes. It has a random mode. It's going to have a really, really nice step sequencer as well, where basically it's like older synths where you just put in a note.
Kind of. Not a step sequencer. It's a programmable arpeggiator.
Yeah.
So when you hold down the notes, it takes them in order and then basically starts looping that. But you also have random modes and stuff. And
yeah.
We
So
may add
step
a couple
sequencer is a misnomer, but yes, it's a sophisticated programmable arpeggiator. So I'm just going to go here and see what we start getting. I'm going to need to start with, this is our latest OS, and as such, all of our programs that we made for the NAMM show will not work on it at the moment, and I forgot to load them back on, so that's why I can't just be like, crazy sounds, check it out. So I'm just going to have to build one from scratch. So I'll start off here. Some wave mixes going. We have this really great feature in our modulation matrix that allows us to quickly assign modulation sources and destinations. So for example, if I wanted to assign the LFO1 to affect the shape mod of oscillator 1 or the pulse width of that oscillator, I'd just hold the assign mod source, hit LFO1, hold the assign mod destination, hit oscillator 1 shape, change the amount. Here it's starting to modulate that, and I'll just start bringing stuff in here and do that. Hold button's nice because it allows you to just press notes and then you kind of tweak while the sound's going. high pass and self oscillation. Can get pretty wild pretty quick there. There's a lot of different places to add noise. Great thing about that I personally love about how Dave designs his instruments is he doesn't limit the ranges of the parameters so it always sounds pretty. You can make great sounding pretty sounds on it. However, if you need to get into this kind of crazy audio territory like this, it's really quick. You just turn a knob a little bit harder and it can just go completely out. You can also just play the feedback. So you can just play the feedback going here. Let me do this, turn that off. And so this is actually a tuned feedback which tracks with the keyboard. And that's just the feedback on itself. A little delay. A little filter there. You could also just use the filter self-oscillating. It's actually kind of pretty. Anyways, so there's a lot you can do with this. It is a fantastic instrument. I wish I had some patches I could just quickly go through, but maybe I'll try and quickly make a slightly different, more kind of digital wavetable type sound here. Bass? You want bass? Okay. Chris wants bass, he gets bass. Let's just do that really easy. Most very, very basic thing. Do a sine wave. The sub. That's really low. Let's get a little feedbacky here. A little bit of the So that's just two oscillators and a little bit of filter and a little bit of feedback and a little bit of distortion. If you keep adding and it can also be configured to play monophonically, so it's playing it polyphonically, even though it's mostly just single notes at a time. You can play it in a unison 6-voice mode when it's split or stacked. You can play it in a unison 12-voice mode, so it's taking, let's say, that 60 oscillators. Basically, if you're using them all at once and you're using unison 12-voice, you can have 60 oscillators playing all at once, and it's just monstrous sound. It's broken on this, so I can't hit unison. Otherwise, it won't work. It's great. I wish I had more programs here to just kind of run through to play them, but as I said, they're not available here. So hopefully, after the presentation, we'll all come up and can kind of take a listen and play with it and hear where it goes. How are we doing on time here? Okay, so we're about Q&A time. All right, that sounds good. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Right. So maybe if you raise your hand, we'll pass the mics around and you can ask Carson some questions directly.
Or Chris as well.
Or Chris.
Yeah.
Or Chris. Okay. Who's first? There's one hand right there. Are you closer?
On the Tempest, I was just curious. Is there any way that you can like solo each like different button or channel?
Yeah, actually. So there's a mute screen here. which allows you to, when you're playing back, you can see the lights light up. In 16 mutes mode, you can mute them all, just like that, hitting a pad. Each sound also has an individual solo and mute. So you can turn stuff up. I had to kind of breeze through. This is actually one of our most complex instruments in terms of the interface and all the different modes. So I kind of breezed over a lot of stuff in terms of how one would perform with it. But yes, there's mute mode. There's 16 levels mode, which will give you various velocities across the pads. 16 tunings, which is the tuning mode I showed you guys. 16 sounds, mutes, time steps, actually, which is a thing I should have gone over, which is a lot of the TR XOX, roll-in boxes have, which is step sequencing. And so you can step sequence all your sounds as well and navigate through the interface.
Cool, the step sequencer is it actually tracks your velocity when you put a new step in, so you can actually play it in as a step sequencer.
Yeah, it's really, really cool. And you also have an event screen, so you can go in and edit manually using the OLED display. So where's that event screen? And you can see here's all the sequencer data. And you can go in, select a row, and add notes or delete notes. So, anything else?
No, that was the main question.
Okay.
All right. So right here.
There you go. Hey.
So I'm curious, how do you control these analog circuits with digital? Say the filter. It has a 2 to 4 pole switch. Do you use digital potentiometers or things like that, or?
That's a really expensive and not really precise way of doing it. But we did have to resort to using that for the Mofo X4 for the feedback circuit. Usually we design the filter specifically so you can control it with a voltage more smoothly. So the filters, for example, that's the hard part about a filter. It's easy to make an analog filter that you can control with a pot, but it's difficult to make one that you can control with a voltage sweep, basically.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the hard part.
All right. Cool. Thank you.
You're welcome.
This is a basic question. Can you explain what a voice is?
Absolutely. I was actually thinking about this today because sometimes, there's very basic things. So a voice is exactly as you would think. If you want to play one note, it's one voice, right? If you're a singer, it's one voice. Okay. Now, the X4 has 4 voices in that you can play 4 notes at once. And each of those voices is an exact replica of the same signal path that you have going on. So on the X4, each voice has 2 oscillators, its own low-pass filter, all the LFOs, modulation, sequencer, those are all native to one voice. And so that's technically what a voice is. It's one sound of, or one note of the sound.
Simultaneously played, available.
Yeah, so the Prophet 12 is 12-part polyphonic, meaning it has 12 voices. And each of the voices is composed of 4 oscillators, sub-oscillator under oscillator 1, and all the rest of the signal chain.
So if you had 2 extra fingers or your toes or whatever, and you just went for it.
Feet, yeah.
Feet plus hands.
Feet plus hands. You could get 12 notes all at once.
Thank you.
And you can just do it like this too. That'll work. You don't even need extra toes or fingers.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes.
Hey, on the Tempest, you had said a couple things. One, it's a hybrid, so there's samples.
Yeah, actually,
inside.
I didn't even demonstrate that. So we have 450 samples. Is it 400 or 650? Something like that.
Right.
All the numbers get confusing. A lot of samples. A lot of really great drum samples, acoustic drum samples, cymbals, percussion, kind of classic analog drum samples. We have not basses, but more waveforms. So you would actually create basses using the oscillators and various waveforms. We also have the waves from the Prophet VS in the samples as well.
Oh, great. So, I'm sorry. So then off of that, what's the rear interface like for loading and unloading your own samples? And you also said, you're working with the sound. You go and you do something like this and you save it. So what's storage on board like, and how do you get samples on and off and creations on and off?
So you actually can't load samples into the oscillator specifically, but you can save sounds as a collection of the oscillators, the settings, and the sounds. So you can save sounds, beats, and projects.
So you're saving really the parameters of the a la Ableton-ish, so you're not actually modifying.
Yeah.
storage on board per se, that you're no flash RAM or something that you.
We chose the samples specifically to complement the analog voice. So we went with Gold Baby, and F-Expansion provided us with some amazing samples, and we went through them and actually took characteristics that you can't easily make with an analog circuit and used those to give you the extra character that you need. Things like hi-hats, the clean noise type stuff that, you know, it would take a lot more circuitry. It provided a better complement. And then a lot of the old drum sounds, like stuff from the 808, the 909, the Linn drum, that sort of stuff.
So richer leap-off spots.
Exactly,
Great.
exactly. It's a limitation we chose to put in there to give people, you know, to push the analog stuff. Because it really does, you know, a lot of people want the MPC type workflow, load a sample, play the sample.
Yeah.
This is more complicated, but honestly, I think you get a lot more out of it when you put the time in.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. I agree with him.
Talk about the interfaces to the computer. I saw that the Prophet 12 has like a USB port. So is there like librarian software and stuff like that? So
No, just MIDI in and out. So we actually don't make editors for our products. Dave is very adamant about doing only hardware and no software. You don't know, Dave Smith actually created the first software synthesizer and really didn't like it by the end of the time, and that's why he got back into hardware. So he really tries to stay away from the computer software edge of it. But we do have editors made by third parties for editor librarian purposes. But us specifically, we don't produce any kind of software. Our interfaces are meant to have, you know, basically a knob per function, and it'll keep you wanting to work on it in that physical realm instead of using a mouse to control it from somewhere else.
With the exception of the small book boxes, the Mofo and the Tetra, we gear everything towards live performance. It's all making an instrument rather than something that's going to be controlled by algorithms and stuff. So up until, you know, we still basically, that's the philosophy behind the instrument.
Yeah. Can I ask anybody? So on the Tempest then, and for what you just said, in my live rig, can you get sync over 5-pin MIDI so that Tempest will be?
Yeah,
but
it slaves and sends sync over USB or the MIDI ports.
Right.
We're still working on the MIDI implementation right now. When you hit a pad, it sends out a MIDI note. So if you were working in a DAW and you were to say, you know, hit a sound as you're playing it, it would be sent out, and you could record that into your DAW.
Are those fixed? Are those assignable?
They're assignable, yeah.
So then there's one set of MIDI ports or two?
One set, yeah.
Okay,
and the
great.
USB. But you can only do... Okay.
And what's really cool about the way we set it up is you can actually hook in one of the keyboards and play one of the synth voices live, like a bass patch or something, while the other 5 voices are being used by the drums.
Oh, yeah.
So you can actually use the synth and the drums at the same time.
Fantastic.
So little things like that,
I
again,
love it.
geared towards live performance.
Great. Thank you.
And this is Chris's baby. I mean, this is...
You can tell.
He's very intimate.
Good deal. That's great.
Anybody else? Back corner? You're welcome. Oh, we're saying thanks, Sam.
Yes, so on the Tempest, the hi-hats that we heard were not sampled?
The hi-hats we heard were samples.
Oh, okay.
In that kit, yes. So, because since I was doing the 808 emulation, we had the hi-hat samples in there, and I was just having a really hard time doing the exact 808 hi-hat. I didn't have 8 square waves available for you. So
Yeah,
that's how they do it on
that's
the 808.
what I was wondering about. Okay, cool.
Yeah, but you can make some. I mean, I can show you a couple of really cool analog hats that do sound good. So let me. Bring more power supplies next time. So yes, that is a sample. And we can go through here. Let's see what I got. So that's an all analog hi-hat. Just noise and filters. You can use delays on the envelopes too. You can make clap type sounds. That's also an analog one.
raspiness to it like a real pad.
Yeah, it definitely does. And you can do, you know, since we were talking about the samples, I should just show briefly that you can make some very convincing, more acoustic style kits as well. So let's see. This is like a whole song, basically. So you can do all sorts of really nice stuff with it. Here's mutes. You can hear drum beats there. They're a little more sloppy, and I was trying to do something a little sloppier, a little bit not as quantized in kind of generating that stuff. So we have a 96 parts per quarter note resolution, and you can quantize up to 30-second triplets, and then you can shift a note plus or minus 3 ticks from that point. So that's the math behind that. How far is it?
Full resolution, 48.
Yeah. Yeah, so you can get some really, really, you know, nice feel pocket things going on. I'm not a drummer, so I'm, you know, it's like I kind of screw around. It's like, okay, that sounds good, but you know, if you know, I need this to be just a couple ticks early, you could get that in there. You have the resolution in the sequencer, and you can do some really convincing, you know, acoustic, kind of real feel performances. Something we didn't even talk about: swing. We got Roger's swing, Roger Linn's swing in here, which is renowned. As people would say,
Linn groove.
A Linn groove, indeed. So let's see if we can find something here to just run through that real quick. What this is. Ooh, it's fast. This is no swing, and then you can slowly add it in. A little bit more, a little bit more. You can see it's starting to swing all the way up to just completely swung. And so you can do some really, you know, nice, convincing things. There, drummer in a box. Yep. Yep.
Carson, so if I understand correctly, each pad can hold a pattern?
So the hierarchy is you have a project, you load in a project. In the project, there's 16 beats. In each beat, there's 32 sounds. So each pad has a beat, and each pad with a beat has 32 sounds in that beat.
And how long can the beat be?
We have a maximum of 4 bars now, right now. So we're going to be extending that to more. Okay.
Mind blown.
Great. And that was all with 6 voices.
Yeah.
So that was never playing more than 6 sounds at a time.
Yeah.
So again, how can you save that when you made like a song and patches or patterns and stuff like that? Is there a way to transfer that into the computer and for safekeeping or?
Sysix. Yeah.
Sysix, okay.
Anybody
I
else?
have a question for you guys.
Yeah.
What do you think are the coolest features of the Prophet 12 for both of you?
The whole thing.
If you had to pick like one thing.
One thing. It's sound. I would say probably the interface and sound. It's really well laid out, great feature set, and it's unique in the sounds it can create among our other line of synthesizers. It's just very, very unique. I don't know, what's your favorite feature?
Yeah, you know, it's so clean, the sources, and we added a very subtle amount of analog sort of slop to it, that it's been the first product that we've made that I've been really excited to use in my production versus live. Where before it's like they were phenomenal for performing, but this sits so much better. That and the fact that we added really true FM modulation to almost any parameter, including the analog control voltages. So you can modulate nearly anything with the oscillator using the modulation matrix.
It's extremely
so you can
powerful.
FM the feedback or the filters or the distortion or the LFOs or whatever, and it just crazy textures that you can get.
Maybe I missed it. Is there a suggested retail price? Can you talk about
It's
it?
$19.99 MAP. 20? It's
3K.
Oh, it's 3K. I'm sorry. Yes. No, it's more expensive than I said. It is $3,000 MAP with an estimated release date of mid-May.
How much is the Tempest?
Yes.
Wow, what is that now? Is it 2? It's $19.99.
Yeah. Probably find it lower.
Anybody else?
The reason it's expensive is this is a keyboardist synth. This isn't, most producers, this isn't really what you're going for, but there are very, very few options for polyphonic instruments that are analog. They're really, I think this is the only one except the Andromeda, which is no longer in production because of that chip problems. It's a great instrument, but this is basically the only thing on the market that has, what, more than 4 voices that's mass-produced, stable, doesn't require the maintenance that the old school analog stuff does. So the Prophet 08 and now this, and this is the first one that's been over 10.
And we've received a lot of really, really great feedback from some fairly big touring and production artists, and they've been thrilled. So we have great, yeah. So it's really, really great. I should mention, we can offer, is it a 10% discount to anybody who signs my list today through March 31st on any of our products besides the Prophet 12. So if you're interested in purchasing any of our gear in the next couple months, come up to me after. I'll get your name down, and that would be great.
Thank you so much for the demonstration. That was wonderful.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. And remember, these synths are like really awesome, like quality synths. So if you own it for 30 years, you know, it's like what, $100 a year.
People have had their Prophet 5 since then. They're still running.
We also actually have our studio and office in the city. So if anybody is interested in checking stuff out in more detail, we've got all our instruments, including a lot of the old stuff that Dave owned, or produced with sequential circuits. So if you feel like stopping by the studio, send us an email. Probably work out a time to come by and check stuff out.
Where is it?
Where are you located?
North Beach.
Really?
Yep.
And all of our instruments are made and manufactured in San Francisco as well.
Thank you for doing that.